The evening shift at Rosie's diner always felt longer than the morning one. Keisha Williams wiped down the counter for what seemed like the 100th time that night, her feet aching in the worn-out sneakers she'd been meaning to replace for months. Outside, rain pelted against the windows, turning the neon sign's reflection into a blur of pink and blue on the wet parking lot. "You hanging in there, honey?" Dot, the senior waitress, called from the coffee station. At 62, she moved slower than she used to, but still managed to outwork most of the younger staff. "I'm good," Keisha answered, tucking a loose braid behind her ear, just thinking about that anatomy test on Monday. The truth was, she was thinking about a lot more than just her test. The nursing program at community college wasn't getting any cheaper, and her mom's health insurance only covered so much of her diabetes medication. At 19, Keisha sometimes felt like she was carrying the weight of her entire family on her shoulders. The bell above the door jingled, pulling her from her thoughts. A gust of cool air swept through the nearly empty diner, carrying with it the smell of rain and motorcycle exhaust. The man who walked in seemed to fill the entire entrance. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a gray-streaked beard that reached the middle of his chest, he stood dripping on the welcome mat, scanning the room with sharp eyes. His leather vest was adorned with patches, the most noticeable being the distinctive death's head insignia of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The few customers in the diner fell silent. An elderly couple in the corner booth exchanged nervous glances. The truck driver at the counter suddenly became very interested in his coffee. Dot froze mid-pour. Keisha took a deep breath and put on her best customer service smile. "Sit anywhere you like," she called out. "I'll be right with you." The man nodded almost imperceptibly and made his way to the corner booth farthest from the door. He moved with surprising grace for someone so large, like he was trying to make himself less noticeable, an impossible task given his appearance. "You want me to take that one?" Dot whispered, eyeing the newcomer warily. Keisha shook her head. "I've got it." She didn't add that she needed every tip she could get, even if it meant serving customers that made others uncomfortable. She grabbed a menu and a glass of water and approached the booth. Up close, the man looked even more weathered than she'd first thought. Deep lines etched the corners of his eyes and mouth. His hands, now resting on the table, were calloused and scarred. "Evening," she said, placing the water and menu in front of him. "Nasty weather out there, huh?" He looked up and Keisha was struck by the clarity of his blue eyes. They seemed at odds with the hardness of the rest of him. "Been through worse," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "Special tonight is meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans," Keisha said. "Comes with soup or salad and a slice of pie." He didn't open the menu. "That'll do. Coffee black." "You got it." Keisha wrote down the order. "Soup or salad?" "Soup. Whatever you've got." "Vegetable beef tonight." He nodded and Keisha turned to place his order. As she walked away, she noticed the elderly couple paying their bill hurriedly, avoiding looking in the direction of the new arrival. Keisha brought his coffee first, then the soup. The man ate quietly, keeping his eyes down most of the time. Once or twice, she caught him watching the door, as if expecting someone else to come in. When she delivered his main course, she decided to try again with small talk. Her mom always said Keisha could talk to a fence post if given the chance. "You just passing through town?" she asked, refilling his coffee. He paused, fork halfway to his mouth, as if weighing whether to answer. "Something like that," he finally said. Then, surprising her, he added, "Meeting some brothers tomorrow. Chapter business." "Oh, you have family here?" Keisha asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Something like that," he repeated, and Keisha realized he meant his motorcycle club. "Well, I hope the rain clears up for you," she said. "Can't be fun riding in this." "It ain't the rain that bothers you after a while," he said. "It's the idiots who can't drive in it," Keisha laughed. "Tell me about it. I don't even have a bike, and I know exactly what you mean." As the evening wore on, the diner emptied completely except for the biker. The truck driver left a decent tip. The elderly couple did not. Dot clocked out at 10, leaving just Keisha, the cook, and their manager, Ray, who spent most of his time in the tiny office doing paperwork. The biker took his time with his meal, particularly savoring the apple pie. Keisha kept his coffee cup filled and gave him space. There was something about him that didn't match the fearsome image she'd always associated with Hell's Angels. He was intimidating, sure, but also watchful, careful, like someone who'd seen a lot and didn't take anything for granted. Around 10:30, as Keisha was refilling the salt shakers for the morning shift, the bell above the door jingled again. Two young men in hoodies entered, laughing loudly. They smelled of beer and weed, and Keisha suppressed a sigh. Late-night drunks were never fun to serve. "Kitchen's closing in 15, she called to them. "Last order's pretty quick." Come on, pretty lady," the taller one said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "You wouldn't send us out in the rain without some of those famous fries, would you?" His friend snickered, pulling out his phone and starting to film. "Tell her how famous those fries are, Cody." "World famous," Cody slurred, grinning at Keisha. "Almost as hot as you." Keisha had been dealing with this kind of thing since she started working at 15. She had her standard responses ready. "Fries it is. Anything to drink?" From the corner of her eye, she noticed the biker had stopped eating. He was watching the interaction, his face unreadable. "Got any beer?" The one with the phone asked, still filming. "Sorry, no alcohol. Soda, tea, coffee, or milkshakes," Keisha replied, keeping her tone pleasant but firm. "Coffee's fine," Cody said, suddenly dropping his voice to add, "Sweet thing, like you probably shouldn't be working so late all alone." "I'm not alone." "Ray's in the back," Keisha said, moving to the coffee pot. She wasn't actually scared. These guys were annoying but seemed harmless enough. But she was tired and not in the mood for their nonsense. As she poured the coffee, she heard the sound of heavy boots on the linoleum. The biker had stood up and was making his way to the restroom. As he passed behind the two young men, he didn't say a word. But something about his presence made them both fall silent and put the phone away. When the bathroom door closed, Cody muttered, "What's his problem?" "Just some old biker dude," his friend replied, but he kept his voice down. Keisha placed their coffees in front of them. "I'll get your fries started." By the time the biker returned, the two young men were subdued, scrolling through their phones and avoiding eye contact with everyone. The biker returned to his booth and asked for his check. Keisha brought it over. "Hope everything was okay." "Best meal I've had in a week," he said, reaching into his pocket. His expression changed suddenly, eyebrows furrowing as he patted first one pocket, then another. He checked the inside pocket of his vest, then the back pockets of his jeans. "Everything okay?" Keisha asked. The man's weather-beaten face flushed slightly. He checked his pockets again, more thoroughly this time. "Had my wallet when I came in," he muttered, half to himself. Keisha could see the embarrassment beneath his gruff exterior. Without hesitation, she picked up the check and tucked it into her apron pocket. "Don't worry about it," she said quietly. "It happens." He looked up at her, those startlingly clear blue eyes narrowing. "I don't take handouts." "It's not a handout," Keisha said. "Let's just say you're helping me practice my random acts of kindness. My grandma always said what goes around comes around." The man stared at her for a long moment. In the background, Keisha could hear the cook calling that the fries were ready, but she didn't move. Finally, the biker gave a single nod. "I'll remember this," he said simply. "Just pay it forward sometime," Keisha replied with a smile. As he stood to leave, he paused, glancing at the two young men who were now watching him warily. He looked back at Keisha. "You be careful, little sister. Not everyone deserves your kindness." With that, he zipped up his leather jacket and headed for the door. The bell jingled once more, and then he was gone, disappearing into the rainy night. Keisha watched through the window as he kick-started his motorcycle, a large black Harley with saddlebags, and pulled out of the parking lot, taillights glowing red in the darkness. She didn't know it yet, but that act of kindness would come back to her in ways she could never have imagined. The door had barely closed behind the biker when Ray emerged from the back office. His usual frown deepened by what he'd just witnessed through the security camera. "What was that about?" he demanded, arms crossed over his chest. Keisha busied herself clearing the biker's table. "Nothing. Just a customer who forgot his wallet. So you let him walk out without paying?" Ray followed her to the busing station. "That comes out of your check, Williams." "You know the policy." She did know the policy. It was printed in bold at the bottom of the employee handbook. Staff members were responsible for any tabs they approved without management consent. But something about the biker's pride, the way embarrassment had briefly cracked through his tough exterior, had touched her. "It's fine. Ray, I'll cover it." Keisha stacked the dishes with practiced efficiency. "It wasn't that much anyway." Ray shook his head. $27.50 plus tax. That's over 3 hours of work at minimum wage. The two drunk guys at the counter were watching the exchange with interest. Keisha lowered her voice. Can we not do this right now? Your funeral, Ray muttered, turning away. And don't expect me to bend the rules when your tuition bill comes due next month. Keisha bit her tongue. Ray knew her situation. Everyone at the diner did. Single mom working overtime at the hospital. Younger brother with asthma. Nursing school tuition payments that seemed to increase every semester. The last thing she needed was to throw away nearly $30, but somehow, it had felt like the right thing to do. She delivered the fries to the two guys, who had suddenly become overly polite. Thanks, the shorter one said, no longer filming. Hey, was that guy really a Hell's Angel? Just a customer, Keisha replied, not wanting to discuss it. My cousin says they're all ex-cons, Cody said, shoving fries into his mouth. Like murderers and stuff. Your cousin says a lot of things, his friend snorted. Keisha left them to their debate and returned to her closing duties. As she counted her tips for the night, reality sank in. $53. Not terrible for a rainy Thursday, but not great either. Minus the biker's bill, she'd walk away with barely enough to cover the water bill that was sitting unpaid on her kitchen counter. She thought about calling her mom, but quickly dismissed the idea. Loretta Williams worked 12-hour shifts as a nursing assistant and needed her sleep. Besides, what would she say? Hey, Mom, I gave away half my night's earnings to a random biker because he looked embarrassed. By the time she finished closing, it was nearly midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot slick and shiny under the streetlights. Keisha pulled her jacket tighter and headed for the bus stop 2 blocks away. Want a ride? She turned to see Ray locking the diner's front door, car keys in hand. No thanks, she said automatically. Ray had never been inappropriate with her. But something about his offer tonight felt like it would come with a lecture she wasn't in the mood to hear. Suit yourself? He shrugged. Just trying to save you some time. Don't you have that big test on Monday? Keisha paused. He was right, every minute counted these days. Between shifts at the diner, classes, study groups, and helping her mom with her little brother Dion, she was running on fumes most days. Actually, yeah, thanks. They drove in silence for the first few minutes. Windshield wipers squeaking occasionally against the glass. Ray's ancient Toyota smelled of cigarettes and the pine tree air freshener that did little to mask it. You know, he finally said, turning onto Maple Avenue. I started exactly where you are, waiting tables to pay for school. Keisha stared out the window. Here it comes. Took me 6 years to get my associate's degree in business management, Ray continued. You know why it took so long? Because you kept giving free food to strangers? Keisha suggested, immediately regretting her sarcasm. To her surprise, Ray laughed, a short, rusty sound. Smart ass. No, because I didn't know how to say no. My sister needed money for rent. My buddy needed help with car payments. My girlfriend, well, you get the idea. They stopped at a red light. In the dashboard glow, Ray looked older than his 40-something years. You're smart, Williams. Smarter than most who come through that diner. But you've got to learn to look out for yourself sometimes. The light turned green. That guy tonight, you think he's losing sleep over the fact that you paid for his dinner? He's probably drinking with his buddies right now, hasn't given you a second thought. Keisha wanted to argue, but found she couldn't. What did she really know about the biker? Maybe Ray was right. Maybe she'd thrown away good money on someone who didn't deserve it or appreciate it. Here's the turn, right? Ray asked as they approached her apartment complex. Yeah, the one with the broken gate. The car pulled to a stop in front of her building, a 2-story walk-up that had seen better days. Most of the windows were dark. Her neighbors, like her mom, worked early shifts. Thanks for the ride, Keisha said, reaching for the door handle. Listen, Ray said, stopping her. He pulled out his wallet and extracted 3 $10 bills. Take it. Consider it an advance on next week. Keisha stared at the money, pride warred with practicality in her mind. I can't. You can and you will, Ray interrupted. But here's the deal. No more freebies to strangers, no matter how scary they look. Got it? After a moment's hesitation, Keisha took the money. Got it, thanks, Ray. Don't thank me. Just graduate and get a real job so I can hire someone with less attitude. It was as close to affection as Ray ever got. Keisha smiled despite herself. I'll work on the attitude part. As Ray's car pulled away, Keisha climbed the stairs to the second-floor apartment. She unlocked the door quietly, knowing her mom would be asleep. The digital clock on the microwave read 12:23 a.m. A note was propped against the sugar bowl. Leftover chicken in fridge. Dion's inhaler refill ready at pharmacy. Love you, Mom. Keisha set her bag down and sank onto one of the kitchen chairs, suddenly exhausted. The $30 from Ray felt heavy in her pocket. Not quite enough to make up for what she'd spent, but enough to ease the immediate pressure. She pulled out her anatomy textbook, intending to review at least one chapter before bed. But as she flipped through the pages, her thoughts kept returning to the biker. Why had she done it? It wasn't just kindness. There had been something in his eyes when he realized he couldn't pay. Pride, yes, but also something else. Worry, fear. Whatever it was, it had made him seem suddenly human in a way his intimidating appearance had masked. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was Tanisha from her study group. Library tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring coffee if you love us. Keisha texted back a thumbs up and finally closed her book. Sleep now, studying tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, she'd see the biker again someday and find out if her instincts about him had been right. As she drifted off to sleep, Keisha wondered what her grandmother would have said about tonight. Grandma Rose had always told her that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed that way. What goes around comes around, she'd say, but sometimes it takes the long way home. Morning came too quickly. Keisha's alarm jolted her awake at 6:30, barely 5 hours after she'd fallen asleep. Her mom was already gone. Thursday nights and Friday mornings were back-to-back shifts at the hospital. The apartment was quiet except for Dion's light snoring from the bedroom they shared. She made coffee, stronger than usual, and leaned against the counter as she drank it. Friday meant a morning shift at the diner, afternoon classes, and then the weekend to study. No time to dwell on last night's impulse or Ray's warning. As she dressed in her waitress uniform, Keisha made a promise to herself. No more random acts of charity, no matter how right they felt in the moment. She had too many responsibilities, too many people counting on her, to be giving away money she didn't have. What she didn't know was that across town in a rundown motel room, the biker with the clear blue eyes was making a promise of his own. Keisha's morning routine had become a science of efficiency. Shower in 5 minutes. Breakfast while helping Dion with his homework. Quick check of Mom's blood sugar log. Out the door by 7:15. Today, though, she moved through the motions with a heaviness that coffee couldn't shake. You look tired, Dion observed, shoving his math worksheet into his backpack. At 12, he noticed everything but cleaned up nothing. Thanks, Captain Obvious, Keisha replied, ruffling his hair. You taking your inhaler to school? He patted his pocket. Got it. You working late again? Double shift. Mrs. Parker's picking you up after basketball practice. Dion made a face. Her house smells like cats. And money, Keisha reminded him. Their elderly neighbor charged half what the after-school program did. Just do your homework there and be nice. I'll be home by 10. The morning was bright and cool, the puddles from last night's rain already drying on the sidewalks. Keisha walked Dion to his bus stop before catching her own bus to the diner. The normalcy of it all. Crossing guards waving, construction workers wolfing down breakfast burritos, business people glued to their phones made last night's encounter with the biker seem almost dreamlike. But the reality of it hit her again when she pushed open the back door of Rosie's diner at 7:58 a.m. You're cutting it close, Dot said, already in her apron and orthopedic shaw. Ray's on the warpath this morning. When isn't he? Keisha tied her apron with practiced hands. What's his problem today? Something about bikers taking over the town. Apparently there's some big motorcycle club gathering this weekend. He's worried they'll scare off the regular customers. Keisha paused in the middle of checking the coffee filters. Bikers like Hell's Angels? That's what Tommy says. Tommy was their fry cook whose cousin worked at the gas station on the edge of town. Says about 40 of them checked into the Pine Lodge Motel last night. More coming today. A small flutter of anxiety tickled Keisha's stomach. Would the man from last night be among them? Would he remember her? Or had Ray been right? Was she just a footnote in his day, forgotten as soon as he'd ridden away? The morning rush left little time for wondering. The diner filled with its usual Friday crowd. Truckers, retirees, and the occasional family heading out of town for the weekend. Keisha moved on autopilot, pouring coffee and taking orders, her smile professional but her mind elsewhere. During a rare lull around 10:30, she slipped into the back to check her phone. 2 texts from her study group. Library time moved to 3. Can you still make it? Bring those awesome flashcards from last week. Keisha sighed. She'd promised Ray she'd stay until closing tonight to make up for yesterday's mistake. There was no way she'd make it to the study session, which meant she'd be cramming all weekend for Monday's test. Williams. Ray's voice cut through her thoughts. Table 6 needs a refill and your pancake order's been sitting under the heat lamp for 3 minutes. She shoved her phone back in her pocket. On it. As she delivered the pancakes to a family with 2 small children, the bell above the door chimed. Keisha glanced up and felt her heart skip a beat. It wasn't him, not the biker from last night. But this man wore the same leather vest with the same patches. He was younger, though, with a closely cropped beard and a sleeve of tattoos visible beneath his t-shirt. He scanned the diner much as the other man had done, eyes sharp and assessing, and then he saw her. For a moment, they locked eyes across the room. His expression changed. A flicker of recognition, though she was certain they'd never met. He nodded once, then took a seat at the counter. Dot moved to serve him, but Keisha touched her arm. I've got it. You sure? You're already running behind. I'm sure. Heart hammering, Keisha approached the counter. Up close, she could see the patches on his vest more clearly. The winged skull that marked him as a Hell's Angel, plus others she couldn't decipher. A name was stitched on the right side. Digger. Coffee? She asked, already reaching for the pot. Black, he confirmed. His voice surprisingly soft for such a rough-looking man. As she poured, she couldn't help but ask, Are you with the guy who was here last night? Older man, gray beard? Digger studied her face. Might be. Lots of us in town this weekend. Right. Keisha set the coffee down. Can I get you anything else? He ordered eggs and toast, nothing fancy. As she turned to put the order in, he added, You always pay for strangers' meals? The question stopped her cold. So the man from last night had mentioned it. Not usually, she admitted. Just seemed like the right thing to do. Digger nodded, seeming to weigh her answer. What's your name? Keisha. Keisha, he repeated as if committing it to memory. Then he turned his attention to his coffee, effectively ending the conversation. Throughout her shift, more bikers trickled in, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs. They were largely quiet, polite even, though their presence clearly made some of the regular customers nervous. A few asked for Keisha specifically, which didn't escape Ray's notice. You got a fan club today, he remarked during her lunch break. Should I be worried? Keisha shrugged, too tired to engage. She'd been up until 2 a.m. studying, and it was catching up to her now. They tip well, was all she said. By mid-afternoon, the diner had developed an unusual rhythm. The regular lunch crowd had thinned out earlier than normal, seemingly put off by the leather-clad men occupying several tables. But those empty seats were quickly filled by more bikers, creating a steady stream of business that kept everyone hustling. Never seen so many motorcycles in one place, Dot marveled, peering out the window at the parking lot, now filled with gleaming Harleys. What do you think they're doing in town? Annual gathering, said one of the bikers seated nearby. He was older than most, with leathery skin and hands like baseball gloves. Happens somewhere different each year. This time it's your lucky town. Lucky, Ray muttered under his breath as he passed with a stack of clean plates. As her double shift wore on, Keisha felt the missed study session like a weight on her shoulders. Her feet ached, her back protested, and the equation she'd been trying to memorize kept slipping away from her tired brain. She'd have to pull an all-nighter tomorrow to have any chance at passing Monday's test. Around 7 p.m., during the dinner rush, her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mom. Dion's inhaler empty. Need to pick up refill before pharmacy closes at 9. Can you swing by? Keisha checked the time. There was no way she could leave now, get to the pharmacy across town and make it back before closing. She texted back, stuck at work. Can Mrs. P take him? I'll pay her back. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she's not answering. I'm stuck in ER overflow until 11. We'll figure something out. Keisha bit her lip, fighting back tears of frustration. One more thing. Always one more thing threatening to pull her carefully balanced life apart. Everything okay? She looked up to find Digger watching her from his seat at the counter. He'd been there on and off all day, sometimes leaving for an hour or 2, then returning. Fine, she said automatically, tucking her phone away. More coffee? He pushed his cup toward her. You don't look fine. Something about his direct gaze broke through her professional facade. My brother's inhaler is empty. Pharmacy closes at 9. I'm stuck here until 10. Digger glanced at the clock, then back at her. Where's the pharmacy? Griffin Street. Other side of town, why? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill, leaving it beside his empty plate. Tell your manager you need a break. I can't just tell him, Digger repeated, his voice still soft but carrying a note of authority that made Keisha think he was used to being obeyed. I'll be outside. 10 minutes of arguing with Ray later. Keisha found herself climbing onto the back of Digger's motorcycle, a spare helmet secured over her braids. Hold on tight, he instructed. And then they were off, weaving through evening traffic at a speed that both terrified and exhilarated her. As the wind whipped past, Keisha couldn't help but wonder what she'd gotten herself into, and what tomorrow might bring. The world looked different from the back of a motorcycle. Buildings blurred, traffic parted, and the evening air felt sharper somehow, more alive. Keisha clung to Digger's leather vest, her heart pounding in rhythm with the bike's engine. They weaved through intersections and around corners, covering ground that would have taken 20 minutes by bus in less than 7. At a red light, Digger called over his shoulder. You good back there? Yeah, Keisha shouted, surprised to find she was telling the truth. The initial fear had given way to something else, a rush of freedom, of possibility. For these few minutes, she wasn't a stressed nursing student or an overworked waitress or a worried sister. She was just a girl on an adventure. They pulled into the pharmacy parking lot with 15 minutes to spare before closing. Keisha dismounted on shaky legs, removing the helmet and smoothing down her braids. That was something, she said, unable to suppress a smile. Digger's expression remained serious. Go on. I'll wait. Inside the pharmacy, Keisha fumbled for her insurance card and ID. The pharmacist, an older woman with cat-eye glasses, kept glancing nervously at the window where Digger sat astride his motorcycle, arms crossed. Friend of yours? She asked as she processed the prescription. Sort of, Keisha replied, unsure how to explain. Well, he's causing quite the stir. Mrs. Gunderson just took her heart medication and left out the back door. Keisha winced. He's actually helping me out. The pharmacist raised an eyebrow but said nothing more, handing over Dion's inhaler with instructions Keisha had memorized years ago. Outside, the evening had deepened into dusk, streetlights flickering on one by one. Digger remained where she'd left him, a statue in black leather. As she approached, he straightened. Got what you needed? Keisha held up the pharmacy bag. Yeah, thanks for this, seriously. He shrugged. No big deal. It is to me. And to my brother. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why are you helping me? Digger's eyes met hers, and for a moment he seemed to be considering how much to say. Word gets around, he finally replied. Good deeds don't go unnoticed. Before she could press further, he handed her the helmet again. Your place first or back to the diner? Home, if that's okay. I need to drop this off. The ride to her apartment complex was shorter but just as exhilarating. This time, Keisha found herself leaning into the turns, moving with the motorcycle rather than against it. When they pulled up outside her building, she was almost disappointed it was over. Second floor, right? Digger asked, cutting the engine. Keisha blinked in surprise. How did you know that? Again, that measured look. Like I said, word gets around. A chill that had nothing to do with the evening air ran down Keisha's spine. Have you been watching me? Not me personally. He seemed to realize how that sounded and softened his tone. Look, after what you did for our president, we just wanted to make sure you were good. Your president? Keisha's mind raced back to the man from the night before, the older biker with the gray beard and clear blue eyes. That's who he is? Digger nodded. Road dog. He runs this chapter. He paused, then added, he had his wallet stolen earlier that day. Some punks jumped him at a rest stop outside of town. Had his cash, cards, everything. Understanding dawned on Keisha. That's why he was so embarrassed. Road dog doesn't get embarrassed, Digger said automatically, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. He was just in a situation. Right. Keisha smiled slightly. And the club looks out for its own. Something like that. She glanced at her building, where the lights were now on in her apartment. Mrs. Parker must have brought Dion home. I should get this inhaler up to my brother, she said, holding up the pharmacy bag. Digger nodded. And I should get you back to the diner before your boss blows a gasket. He probably already has, Keisha grimaced. Need me to talk to him? The offer was made casually, but Keisha had no doubt that Ray would fold like a cheap lawn chair if confronted by a Hell's Angel. No, but thanks. I can handle Ray. Digger seemed to approve of this answer. I bet you can. Keisha ran upstairs, explained the inhaler situation to Mrs. Parker, hugged Dion quickly, and was back outside in under 5 minutes. The motorcycle rumbled to life again, and they were off toward the diner. The parking lot was even more crowded now. At least 24 motorcycles lined up in neat rows, their chrome parts gleaming under the streetlights. Inside, the diner was packed, nearly every seat taken by leather-clad men and a few women in similar attire. Ray met them at the door, his face a mixture of relief and annoyance. 45 minutes, Williams. That's how long you've been gone. Sorry, Keisha said, already reaching for her apron. Family emergency? Yeah, well, we've got a situation here too. He jerked his head toward the crowded restaurant. These guys have been asking for you specifically. Keisha looked past him, taking in the sea of leather vests and tattoos. Several of the bikers nodded in recognition when they saw her. For me? Why, Ray threw up his hands. How should I know? But they won't let Dot or Jenny serve them. It's you or nobody, apparently. Digger, who had followed her inside, spoke up. Problem. Ray's demeanor changed instantly, his spine straightening. No, sir, no problem at all. Just getting Keisha back to work. Good. Digger clapped Ray on the shoulder, perhaps a bit harder than necessary. She deserves a raise, by the way. Best service in town. With that, he moved past them to join a group of bikers in the far corner. Keisha tied her apron, hiding a smile at Ray's stunned expression. I'll start with tables 3 through 8. The next 2 hours passed in a blur. Keisha moved from table to table, taking orders, delivering food, refilling drinks. The bikers were surprisingly polite. Please and thank you punctuated every interaction, and they tipped generously. A few tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her studies or how long she'd worked at the diner, but most seemed content to simply watch her with a kind of respectful curiosity. Toward the end of her shift, as she was refilling coffee cups at a booth near the back, the bell above the door chimed. The restaurant, which had been filled with the low rumble of conversation, fell silent. Keisha turned to see what had caused the sudden hush. It was him, the man from the night before, Road Dog, as Digger had called him. He stood in the doorway much as he had yesterday, scanning the room with those piercing blue eyes. When he spotted Keisha, he gave a slight nod of recognition. One by one, the other bikers rose to their feet, a sign of respect that spoke volumes about the man standing among them. He moved through the room, exchanging brief greetings with various members, making his way toward the back where a booth had been left conspicuously empty. As he passed Keisha, he paused. Up close, in the brighter lights of the busy diner, she could see the lines etched deep in his weathered face, the small scar that bisected one eyebrow, the way his beard was more salt than pepper. Evening, he said, his deep voice exactly as she remembered. Evening, she replied, suddenly nervous. Coffee? The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Black. Keisha nodded and hurried to get a fresh pot. When she returned to his table, he was sitting alone, though several other high-ranking members occupied nearby booths. She poured his coffee with care, conscious of the eyes watching her. Will you be having dinner tonight? She asked, slipping automatically into her waitress routine. Just the coffee for now. He took a sip, nodding in approval. You've had a busy day, it wasn't a question. Keisha wondered just how much Digger and the others had told him. Nothing I can't handle, she said. Road Dog studied her over the rim of his cup. My guys tell me you're in nursing school. That's right, good profession. My late wife was a nurse. He set his cup down. Army Medical Corps. Toughest person I ever knew. The personal detail surprised her. I'm sorry for your loss. He acknowledged this with a slight incline of his head. How's your brother's asthma? Keisha blinked, taken aback by how much he seemed to know about her life. Better. We got his inhaler refilled. Good. Digger said he helped with that. He did. Keisha shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how tired she was after the long double shift. He was very kind. Road Dog made a sound that might have been a chuckle. Not a word most people associate with us. Maybe they should. The older man looked up at her, something like approval in his gaze. Maybe so. A call from another table drew her attention. "Excuse me," she said. "I should get back to work." As she turned to leave, Road Dog spoke again. His voice pitched low so only she could hear. "Sometimes kindness finds its way home. Little sister." The words, so similar to what her grandmother used to say, stayed with Keisha for the rest of her shift. By the time she hung up her apron at 10:30, most of the bikers had left, heading back to the motel or to whatever nightlife the small town offered. Road Dog had departed an hour earlier, leaving a $20 tip for a $3 cup of coffee. Exhausted but somehow lighter than she'd felt in days, Keisha counted her tips in the break room. Between the bikers' generosity and the unusual dinner rush, she'd made more in one shift than she typically earned in 3. "Good night?" Ray asked, lingering in the doorway. "Not bad," she admitted, securing the money in her wallet. "Listen, about this morning. I might have been a bit harsh." Keisha raised an eyebrow. "Might have been." Ray had the grace to look sheepish. "Okay, I was a jerk. But these bikers, they're not what I expected." "Me neither," Keisha said, thinking of Digger's help and Road Dog's quiet dignity. "Anyway, you need a ride home?" Ray jingled his keys. "It's late and after yesterday?" Keisha was about to accept when Dot poked her head in. "Someone waiting for you out front, honey." Curious, Keisha stepped into the main dining room to find a well-dressed man sitting at the counter. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, nothing like the bikers who had filled the diner all day. When he saw her, he stood up. "Keisha Williams?" he asked, extending his hand. "My name is Thomas Grant. I represent the local chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club." Keisha stared at the outstretched hand, then at the man's face. He looked more like an accountant than someone who'd be associated with the Hells Angels. Clean-shaven, with neatly trimmed hair and glasses that caught the diner's fluorescent lights. "I'm sorry," she said, shaking his hand cautiously. "You represent the local chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club," he repeated, his tone professional but friendly. "I handle certain legal and financial matters for them. Do you have a moment to talk?" Ray and Dot exchanged looks behind the counter. Ray stepped forward. "Everything okay here?" Thomas Grant smiled reassuringly. "Perfectly fine. I just need a brief word with Ms. Williams, if that's all right." "It's okay, Ray," Keisha said, though her mind raced with possibilities. Was there a problem? Had she somehow offended the club? "We can sit over there." She led Thomas to a booth by the window. The diner was nearly empty now, just a couple of truckers finishing late meals and Dot wiping down tables. "First," Thomas said, once they were seated, "I want to thank you for your kindness to Mr. Sullivan, Road Dog, as the club members call him." "It wasn't a big deal," Keisha said automatically. "Actually, it was." Thomas folded his hands on the table. "What you may not know is that before his wallet was stolen, Road Dog was on his way to make arrangements for this weekend's gathering. The theft put him in a difficult position. No ID, no credit cards, no way to secure the venue or make the necessary deposits." Keisha felt a flutter of understanding. "So when he couldn't pay for his meal?" "It was the final straw in an already challenging day," Thomas confirmed. "Your act of kindness meant more than just a free meal. It was a reminder that there are still good people in the world, even when things aren't going well." "Anyone would have done the same," Keisha said, though she knew that wasn't true. "Ray certainly wouldn't have," Thomas smiled. "I think we both know that's not the case." He reached into the leather briefcase beside him. "Road Dog was quite moved by your gesture. He asked me to give you this." He slid an envelope across the table. Keisha stared at it, not reaching out. "What is it?" "Open it." With hesitant fingers, Keisha picked up the envelope. It was heavy paper, the kind used for formal occasions. Inside was a check and a handwritten note on motorcycle club stationery. The check was made out to Keisha Williams for $5,000. Her breath caught. She looked up in shock. "I can't accept this." "Road Dog thought you might say that," Thomas said with a knowing smile. "That's why he asked me to tell you it's not charity. It's not even a thank you. It's an investment." "An investment?" "In your future." "As a nurse," Thomas gestured to the note. He explained it better than I could. Keisha unfolded the note with trembling hands. The handwriting was surprisingly neat, all capital letters in blue ink. "Little sister, sometimes the world gives us a chance to be better than we think we are. You took that chance when many wouldn't. Now I'm taking mine. My wife would have liked you. She believed good hearts make the best healers. The world needs more nurses who see people, not just patients. This isn't charity, it's me paying forward. What someone once did for me when I was young and too proud to ask for help. Use it for school. Make someone else's life better someday. Respect. RDPS. The guys voted. You're honorary family now, that means something where we come from. Keisha read the note twice, blinking back tears. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Thomas replied gently. Road Dog doesn't do things for the thanks. But I will tell you this. In the 15 years I've worked with the club, I've never seen him do something quite like this. But why me? Why so much? Thomas considered his words carefully. The Hells Angels have a certain reputation. Some of it earned, some not. But at their core there's a code. Loyalty. Respect. Taking care of their own. He paused. When Road Dog told the others what happened, how you covered his meal without judgment or expectation, it struck a chord. In their world, character matters more than appearances. Keisha thought about Digger helping her get Dion's inhaler, about the bikers who'd filled the diner all evening, polite and respectful despite their intimidating presence. The amount, Thomas continued, was Road Dog's decision. But I happen to know he did some asking around. $5,000 is approximately one semester's tuition at the nursing program you're attending, correct? Keisha nodded, speechless. It was almost exactly what she needed. Then consider it an investment in one more good heart in the medical field. Thomas stood, collecting his briefcase. I should be going. Unless you have questions? 1,000 questions swirled in Keisha's mind, but only one made it to her lips. Will I see them again, Road Dog and the others? Thomas smiled. The club has members all over the country. They travel frequently, and now they know where to get the best service in town. He extended his hand again. It was a pleasure meeting you, Ms. Williams. I think you're going to make an excellent nurse someday. Keisha shook his hand, still dazed. Thank you for everything. After Thomas left, Keisha sat alone in the booth, the check and note on the table before her. The magnitude of what had just happened was slowly sinking in. One simple act of kindness, a meal she'd covered on impulse, had somehow led to this life-changing moment. Ray approached cautiously. Everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Keisha folded the note and slipped it along with the check back into the envelope. Everything's fine, she said, a smile spreading across her face. Better than fine, actually. What did the suit want? Ray's curiosity was evident, just to deliver a message. Keisha stood, suddenly eager to get home and tell her mom the incredible news. I'm heading out. See you tomorrow? Ray nodded, clearly burning with questions he couldn't bring himself to ask. Yeah, see you tomorrow. And, tell your brother I hope he's feeling better. The night air was cool on Keisha's face as she walked to the bus stop, the envelope tucked securely in her bag. The weight of worry she'd carried for so long felt lighter somehow, as if someone had lifted a corner of it. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Keisha woke early, despite having stayed up late telling her mother everything that had happened. Loretta Williams had cried when she saw the check, then immediately started worrying about whether it was legal to accept it. It's not dirty money, Mom, Keisha had assured her. And it's not charity either. It's a scholarship, kind of. Now sipping coffee at the kitchen table while Dion watched cartoons, Keisha made plans. The fall semester's tuition was due in 2 weeks. With this check, she could pay it in full and still have enough left over to cut back on some shifts at the diner, which meant more study time. Better grades, maybe even a few hours of sleep now and then. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanisha. Library at 11? Last chance to cram before Monday. Keisha replied with a thumbs up, then added, I'll bring coffee and donuts. Got some good news to share. As she was getting ready to leave, there was a knock at the apartment door. Dion got there first, pulling it open without checking to see who it was. A habit Keisha had lectured him about 100 times. Whoa, Dion breathed, eyes wide. Keisha rounded the corner to find Digger standing in the doorway, looking slightly out of place in the narrow hallway of their apartment building. He held a small paper bag in one hand. Morning, he said. Hope it's not too early? No, it's fine, Keisha said, surprised but not unhappy to see him. Is everything okay? Yeah, just dropping this off before we head out of town. He handed her the paper bag. Road Dog wanted you to have it. Inside was a small leather keychain with the Hells Angels insignia on one side. On the back was a single word etched into the leather. Family. It's not official club property, Digger explained. But if you ever run into any of us on the road, it'll let them know you're under Road Dog's protection. I don't know what to say, Keisha admitted. The check was already too much, Digger shrugged. Money's just money. This, he tapped the keychain. This means something different. Tell him thank you, Keisha said, for everything. I will. Digger glanced at Dion, who was staring at him with undisguised curiosity. That your brother? Yeah, this is Dion. Cool shirt, Digger said, nodding at Dion's superhero t-shirt. You taking care of your big sister? Dion puffed out his chest. Yeah, she works too much, though. Digger laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. Well, maybe she can take a break now and then. He turned back to Keisha. We're rolling out in an hour. Annual gathering's officially over. But some of the guys mentioned stopping by the diner when they're passing through town. They'll always have a table, Keisha promised. After Digger left, Keisha stood in the doorway for a moment, the keychain in her hand and a sense of wonder washing over her. How strange life was. How a single decision could create ripples that changed everything. Her mother's voice called from the kitchen. Who was that at the door? Just a friend, Keisha replied, closing the door with a smile. Just family checking in. 6 months later, as Keisha was finishing her shift at the diner, now just weekends thanks to her scholarship, the rumble of motorcycles filled the parking lot once again. Through the window, she watched as 3 familiar bikes pulled up, Road Dog's distinctive Harley in the lead. Dot nudged her. Your fan club's back. They're not my fan club, Keisha corrected, already reaching for the coffee pot. They're family. And as the door swung open, Keisha thought of her grandmother's words. Kindness finds its way home, sometimes taking the long way around. She'd never expected her path to cross with the Hells Angels. Never imagined that a simple act of kindness would change the course of her life. Yet here they were, these unlikely angels, proof that sometimes the most meaningful connections come from the most unexpected places.